When I turned 92, I realized that my whole life I had been chasing the wrong thing. I thought I was running towards success, but I was running away from silence, from emptiness, from myself. And now I stand at the finish line, and there's no one beside me because my family stepped out of that race long before I did. If you're 30 today, don't make my mistake. You won't even notice it happening. One day, you'll look around and realize you've been running for so long, you forgot where home was. My name is Alex, or I suppose that's where every story is supposed to begin. People ask me who I am, and even now, after all these years, my first instinct is still to answer, I'm an architect. Funny, isn't it? Not, I'm a father. Not, I'm a grandfather. Not even, I was Irene's husband. No, my mind still reaches for the job first. I spent most of my life believing that's who I was. Maybe that's where everything started going wrong. I designed apartment buildings, office towers, shopping centers, concrete, steel, glass. For 40 years, those things filled my head from morning until I fell asleep. Sometimes, I'd wake up in the middle of the night because I'd remembered a measurement. Imagine that. Not my daughter's birthday, not my wedding anniversary. A measurement. Funny what the mind decides is important when you train it that way for long enough. Some of those buildings are still standing. People raise children inside apartments I designed. Young couples argue in kitchens that exist because I once drew a line across a sheet of paper. Back then, I used to think that was a beautiful kind of immortality. Now, I'm not so sure. Buildings survive. People don't. Memories don't either. Not unless someone carries them. I met Irene when I was 28. She wasn't anything like me, thank God. She loved paintings, old books, museums. She could spend half an hour looking at one little painting and somehow notice things I'd never see. I'd stand beside her wondering, what exactly are we looking at? She'd smile and try to explain. I usually nodded without really listening. Strange. I thought I understood blueprints better than people. Turns out, people were always the harder thing to read. We lived in a tiny apartment. I mean, really tiny. If Irene opened the oven, I had to move my chair. The kitchen table doubled as my office. Every evening I'd spread drawings across it, rolls of paper, pencils, coffee stains, the smell of graphite. Funny, I haven't thought about that smell in years. It's strange what comes back to you when you get old. Not the important things, little things. The sound of rain against the kitchen window. The way Irene tucked loose hair behind her ear while she cooked. The old clock that was always 5 minutes slow. 5 minutes. Funny, that number keeps following me. Most evenings looked exactly alike. Irene would call, Alex, dinner. I'd answer, coming. I almost never meant now. I meant after one more drawing, one more calculation, one more correction. She'd come into the kitchen, stand beside me. Sometimes she'd put a hand on my shoulder, not to interrupt me, just to remind me she was there. Then she'd quietly say, enough for today. I'd smile without looking up. Just 5 more minutes. I truly believed those words. I wasn't lying. I thought 5 minutes were harmless. No one ever tells you. Life rarely falls apart all at once. It slips away, 5 minutes at a time. Looking back, I can't tell you which evening was the first one I chose work over my family. I honestly don't know. Maybe there wasn't one. Maybe it happened so gradually that none of us noticed. That's the frightening part. The biggest mistakes in my life never felt like mistakes. They felt responsible, reasonable, necessary. That's how they get you. When Anna was born, I wasn't there. Construction site, another city. Couldn't even tell you which one now. Funny, at the time, it felt like the most important project of my career. Today, I can't remember its name, but I remember the hospital room. Funny how memory works. It throws away the concrete and keeps the people. Irene looked exhausted. She smiled when she saw me, a tired smile, the kind people wear when they've already cried all they can. She placed this tiny little bundle into my arms. I'd never held a baby before. I was terrified. She watched me for a long moment. Then she quietly said, "You missed the best part." I laughed, thought she was teasing me. It took me another 40 years to understand she wasn't. We named her Anna. Well, to be honest, Irene named her. I simply said, "That's beautiful." Looking back, that became another habit. Letting someone else carry the moments, while I convinced myself I'd catch up later. I use that word a lot. Later. Later we'll celebrate. Later we'll travel. Later I'll spend more time at home. Later I'll slow down. Funny, later is one of the most dangerous words in the English language, because later has a habit of quietly becoming never. I remember one afternoon, or I think I do. Anna couldn't have been older than 3, maybe 4. Children grow so quickly that years begin to blur together when you reach my age. She was learning to walk across the living room without holding on to furniture. By pure chance, I happened to be home. She took 3 little steps, then 4. Then she lost her balance. I caught her before she hit the floor. I remember smiling, thinking, maybe I'm doing all right. Then she reached past me, straight toward Irene. She wanted her mother, not me. Back then, I told myself, children always want their mothers. Maybe that's true. Or maybe children simply reach for the person who's there every day. It took me far too long to ask myself that question. Anna loved drawing. I suppose she inherited that from Irene. One evening, she climbed onto the chair beside me while I worked. She put a little piece of paper over my blueprints, said, "Daddy, look." I almost told her, "Not now." Funny, I don't remember whether I actually said it. I hope I didn't. I really do. She had drawn a little house, a tree, her mother, and me. At least, I was there in that picture. Months later, I noticed something. Every new drawing looked almost the same. The same little house, the same tree, the same smiling mother. Only, I kept getting smaller. Until one day, I wasn't there anymore. I asked, "Anna, where's Daddy?" She didn't even look up. She kept coloring. Then she shrugged and said, "You're at work." No anger, no sadness, just the truth. Children don't try to break your heart. They simply describe the world exactly as they see it. I must have been 35, maybe 36, still young enough to change, still foolish enough to believe there would always be another chance. There wasn't. There are moments that don't seem important when they happen. Years later, they're the only ones you remember. I think every marriage has one day when one person quietly realizes they're already living alone. The strange part is, the other person usually has no idea. I certainly didn't. One winter morning, Irene brought coffee into my office. Real coffee. She knew I hated the instant kind. I can still see the little steam rising from the cup. Funny, I don't remember what I was drawing that morning. Must have been important. At least, I thought it was. She stood beside my desk, not saying anything, just waiting. Not for a thank you, not even for a conversation, just waiting for me to look up. I didn't. Without lifting my eyes from the plans, I said, "Just leave it there." 4 words, that's all. I've forgotten speeches I spent weeks preparing. I don't remember half the awards people handed me. But those 4 words, I hear them almost every day. Funny how guilt remembers what pride forgets. Looking back, I don't believe Irene left me the day she packed her suitcase. No, she left little by little. Cup of coffee after cup of coffee, dinner after dinner, evening after evening. I simply wasn't paying attention. Anna had a kindergarten performance. I promised I'd be there. I even wrote it down. Can you imagine that? I scheduled my daughter's childhood between 2 business meetings. Back then, that felt responsible, organized, professional. Now, it just feels sad. That morning I looked at my watch. The meeting was running late. I remember thinking, they'll understand. Funny, children always understand. Until one day, they stop expecting you altogether. I didn't go. I sent flowers. At the time, that seemed reasonable. Flowers fix birthdays. Flowers fix anniversaries. Flowers fix apologies. That's what I believed. When I came home, there was a tiny paper crown lying on the kitchen table, covered in glitter. One of those cheap little things children absolutely treasure. I picked it up, turned it over. There was Anna's name written inside. I remember standing there, holding that little paper crown for a long time, longer than I ever spent watching one of her school performances. Strange, isn't it? I don't remember where the flowers ended up. I honestly don't. Maybe they stayed in the vase. Maybe Irene threw them away. Memory lets strange things disappear. But that little paper crown, I can still see every fold, every bit of glitter. Sometimes I wonder if that's punishment or mercy. Years passed, or perhaps they simply slipped through my fingers. When people ask what success feels like, I struggle to answer. I remember airports, hotel rooms that all smelled the same, late flights, cold coffee, blueprints spread across tiny hotel desks. I remember saying the same sentence over and over. Next month will be easier. Funny, next month never arrived. It just kept changing its name. I thought I was sacrificing today's dinner for tomorrow's future. That's how I explained it to myself. And maybe, for a while, I actually believed it. The dangerous thing about ambition is that it almost always sounds reasonable. No one wakes up planning to neglect the people they love. You simply convince yourself that today is an exception. Then tomorrow becomes another exception. After enough exceptions, they become your life. One afternoon, I came home early. I wish I could tell you why. Bad weather, perhaps. A cancelled meeting. Maybe someone was sick. I honestly don't remember. Funny. I can still remember the smell of wet concrete from buildings I worked on 60 years ago. But I can't remember why I came home that day. Anna was sitting on the living room floor, drawing again. She looked up, smiled. "Daddy." Then she asked, "You have tomorrow off?" Such an ordinary question. I answered without thinking, "No, sweetheart, tomorrow's important." She nodded, no tears, no disappointment. She simply picked up another crayon and kept drawing. Children are remarkable that way. They adapt, much faster than adults. I walked past her, into my study, closed the door, started working. At least, that's what I remember. Or maybe that's the version I've repeated in my head for 40 years. Memory changes things, softens some edges, sharpens others. I don't know anymore. Years later, Anna said something that brought that afternoon rushing back. She smiled while she said it, a tired smile, almost kind. She said, "Dad." I stopped asking because I already knew the answer. I don't think she was talking about that one afternoon. I think she was talking about her whole childhood. And somehow, I understood exactly what she meant. Too late. Again. Sometimes people ask me, if you could go back, what would you change? I used to think I'd choose one big moment, one decision, one mistake. Now, I'm not so sure. Maybe I'd simply look up, just once. When Irene walked into the room carrying coffee, when Anna said, "Daddy, look." Funny, I spent 40 years designing buildings people would remember. And in the end, the memories that stayed with me were the moments when someone simply wanted my attention. People ask me, when did things finally begin to get better? I usually smile, because they imagine there was one morning, one conversation, one miracle that fixed everything. Life wasn't that generous. It changed, inch by inch, almost too slowly to notice. By the time I retired, Anna already had a family, a husband, a little boy, Leo. The first time I met him, he stood behind his mother's leg, peeking at me, the way children study strangers, carefully, trying to decide whether they're safe. It stung, not because he was afraid, because I couldn't blame him. You can't expect trust from someone you've only just met, even if you're family. I didn't know how to become a grandfather. No one teaches you that, especially when you never really learned how to be a father. So I did the only thing I understood. I kept showing up every Tuesday. Not because Tuesday meant anything, it just became our day. At first, we hardly talked. We built towers from wooden blocks. Leo knocked them over. I'd build another one, again and again. Funny. For 40 years, I built things people hoped would stand forever. The happiest things I ever built were the ones a little boy laughed while destroying. One afternoon, He looked at me, held up a crooked little tower, and said, "Grandpa, look!" I froze, not because of the tower, because I'd heard those words before. Years earlier, different voice, same request. "Daddy, look!" I don't know if memories really arrive all at once, or if our hearts simply decide they're finally ready to feel them. I looked at Leo, really looked. Every crooked block, every proud little smile. I wasn't going to miss this one, not again. Strange, sometimes life gives you another chance, not to erase the past. It never does that. But to answer a question you ignored the first time. Leo loved drawing. Perhaps children naturally do. Or perhaps that runs somewhere through our family. He drew blue houses, orange trees, purple dogs. Nothing made sense. Everything made sense. I'd ask, "Why's the house blue?" He'd shrug. "I like blue." That made me smile. Irene loved blue. I'd forgotten that for years. Or maybe I'd buried it. Funny, people leave, but little pieces of them have a way of finding you again. Sometimes in a song, sometimes in a smell, sometimes inside a child's drawing. Growing older does something unexpected. People tell you it brings wisdom. I'm not sure that's true. It brings perspective. Those aren't the same thing. Wisdom sounds impressive. Perspective is quieter. It's noticing what deserved your attention all along. I used to measure buildings, floor by floor, wall by wall, window by window. Funny, I never measured how quickly a little girl became a woman. One rainy afternoon, Leo found an old wooden box. Inside, there were photographs, a few medals, some yellowed sketches, and one unopened letter. I knew exactly what it was before I even touched it. Irene's handwriting. I hadn't seen it in years, maybe decades. Leo looked at me. "Grandpa, what's this?" I said, "I don't know if I have the courage to find out." That wasn't entirely true. I knew. I simply wasn't sure I deserved to read it. He handed it to me, very carefully, as though it might fall apart. Perhaps he sensed something inside already had. I opened it for the first time. The paper had turned soft with age. The ink had faded. Her words hadn't. There were no accusations, no anger, no dramatic goodbye. Only one sentence that seemed to grow heavier each time I read it. "I never wanted you to choose me over your work. I only wanted you to notice that we were living beside you." I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the rain to stop. Long enough for Leo to quietly leave the room. Long enough to realize that one sentence had described my entire life. A few days later, I called Irene. My hand shook dialing the number, not because I expected her to answer, because I wasn't sure what I hoped would happen if she did. She answered. There was silence. Then a small laugh. Not a happy laugh, not a bitter one, just the laugh of two people who suddenly realized they'd become old. I said, "I finally read your letter."
She didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, "I wondered if you ever would." She told me she'd remarried an art teacher. For some reason, that felt exactly right. He probably noticed paintings, stopped to watch sunsets, asked how her day had been. Maybe he even drank coffee before it got cold. I smiled, genuinely. For the first time, I wasn't mourning the life I'd lost. I was grateful.
Someone had given her the life she deserved. And perhaps that was the first truly selfless thought I'd had in many years. People think getting old is mostly about losing things: your strength, your hearing, your memory. Some of that's true. But no one tells you that growing old also means seeing your life from far enough away to finally understand its shape. When you're living it, everything feels urgent. Deadlines, meetings, bills, one more project, one more promotion, one more year. From 92, it all looks surprisingly small. Anna and I never became the father and daughter we might have been. Some stories don't get perfect endings. Real life rarely does. There were birthdays I couldn't get back, school plays that only happened once, questions she stopped asking, years that belonged to someone else. Nothing could change that. The hardest lesson age teaches you is that regret has no reverse gear. You don't erase it. You simply learn to carry it without letting it crush you. But something did change, not all at once, slowly, the way spring arrives. One ordinary afternoon after another, Anna started calling, just to ask how I was doing. Sometimes she'd bring over soup, even though I told her I could still cook for myself. She'd laugh. "Dad, I'm not bringing the soup because you can't cook. I'm bringing it because that's what families do." Funny, I spent half my life thinking family was something you provided for. Turns out, family is mostly something you show up for. Every Wednesday, Leo and I walked to the little park near their house. By then, he was taller than I was. That happens before you notice it. One day, they're asking you to tie their shoes. The next, they're slowing down their steps so you can keep up. We'd sit on the same old bench. Sometimes we'd talk. Sometimes we watched people pass by. When you're young, silence feels awkward. You rush to fill it. When you're old, comfortable silence becomes one of life's greatest gifts. One afternoon, Leo asked me, "Grandpa, what was your greatest achievement?" I smiled. Years ago, I would have answered differently. I'd have named a skyscraper, a shopping center, an award. Instead, I looked at him and said, "Being here." He laughed. "No, I mean before that." I laughed too. "No, I understood your question." He didn't say anything, just nodded. A few minutes later, he leaned his head against my shoulder. Without thinking, children do that. Teenagers almost never do. Young men, hardly ever. He was nearly grown, yet for one quiet moment, he leaned on me, the way children lean on people they trust. I looked out across the park and thought, so this is what I spent my whole life looking for. Funny, it had been waiting for me all along. Not long ago, I went back to one of the first apartment buildings I ever designed. It had been renovated, New paint, new windows, young families walking through the courtyard. No one knew who I was, and they shouldn't. Buildings belong to the people who live in them, not the people who designed them. I sat on a bench across the street, watching children ride bicycles. One little girl waved at me. I waved back. For a second, I imagined Anna, not as she is now, but as the little girl who once asked me to look at her drawing. Memory is strange. It doesn't ask permission. It simply walks in, takes your hand, and sits beside you for a while. People sometimes ask whether I regret working so hard. That's not really the right question. Work wasn't the problem. Pride wasn't even the problem. Fear was. I was afraid that if I slowed down, I'd become ordinary. So I kept proving my worth to people who weren't asking me to. Meanwhile, the people who already loved me were quietly waiting for something much simpler: my time. If someone younger than me is listening, I won't tell you to quit your job. I won't tell you money doesn't matter. It does. Responsibility matters. Keeping your promises matters. Providing for the people you love matters. But don't confuse providing with being present. Those are different things. One pays the bills, the other becomes the memories. Funny, at 92, people think you spend a lot of time looking backward. Sometimes I do, but not as much as you'd imagine. Most mornings, I'm thinking about today. Will Leo stop by? Will Anna call? Should I buy that blueberry pie she likes, or the apple one? Life becomes wonderfully small again. Maybe that's the secret. We spend our youth trying to build bigger lives. Then we grow old and discover happiness was always hiding inside the smaller ones. Tomorrow, I'll walk over to Anna's house. She'll probably tell me I didn't need to bring dessert. I'll pretend not to hear her. Leo will tease me about walking too slowly. I'll remind him that one day he'll be hoping to walk this slowly too. He'll roll his eyes. We'll laugh. We'll drink coffee. Maybe we'll sit quietly for a while. And before I leave, I'll tell my daughter I love you. Not because I'm afraid it might be the last chance, because I finally learned those words were never meant to be saved for special occasions. They belonged to ordinary Tuesdays, to quiet dinners, to little paper crowns, to crooked block towers, to simple mornings when someone walks into the room carrying a cup of coffee and hoping you'll look up. Looking back, I built some beautiful buildings. I'm proud of many of them. But if anyone remembers me, I hope it isn't because of concrete. I hope it's because I finally came home. Thank you for listening to an old man. I hope you get there sooner than I did. End.